Welcome everyone to today's video. This video is going to be about painting a landscape using the colour wheel. This is the image I've chosen. It's a Sussex scene of an oast house and there's quite a lot of interesting colours going on and shapes. I've chosen to work very small. This is a canvas from the works. It's not what I'd choose if I was going to be painting something that I would exhibit. The quality is not that good, but it's good for a practice or if you're trying out something new, a new technique or a new medium. And I'm working on a tile, which I quite like at the moment as a palette. My palette today is cadmium red deep, cadmium yellow light, cadmium yellow deep, titanium white, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, and this is permanent violet. You can use obviously your reds and your blues to make a purple or a violet. However, very often I will buy a violet because I just find it a lot easier. I'm going to be using quite a big brush. This is the Graduate number 16 and this is the one that you can get for £2.25 from Sussex Stationers. And I also have my colour wheel. There we are. So I'm going to talk about what I'm going to do today. First of all, talking about the picture. I like the shapes in this and I like the colours. I particularly like this yellow, orange and red here, and then this darker red brown, contrasting with the bright acidic greens. I'm going to think about adding colours into it because I don't think it's quite interesting enough on its own, and I would like this to come forward and maybe the trees to go backwards. So the colour wheel is all about opticals. If you put a red next to a green, which are complementary colours opposite of the colour wheel, you will enhance the colour. So a red surrounding a green will make the green stronger and vice versa. Or if you want, if you've got a red that's quite a dull red but you want it to stand out a little bit more, you might put some green next to it or near it and that will make it stand out. If you don't want it to be too clumsy, because it can be quite clumsy, especially red and green together, you might do a split complementary, which is the narrow triangle. And what that means is you might add a little bit of a green blue or a green yellow next to your red. That will enhance your red, but not as obviously as using the bright green. Then if you go to the triad combination over here, what they will do is slightly enhance each other and be quite balanced. So you might use the red, the blue and the yellow in a painting as the predominant colours. What I'm going to do today, as I said earlier, is use the tetrad, which is the rectangular formula of colours. So today, because I saw that there was an orange and yellow and there's also blues with the sky, I thought I would use the purple, the blue, the orange and the yellow. Now these don't make each other shout and they don't make them more intense. What they do is they work in harmony together. You get a very nice balanced painting. However, you don't really want to have them in equal amounts. So what you probably would do is have one of the colours more dominant than the others. In my case, I think I'm going to choose blue as the dominant colour because of the sky, but I'm going to introduce blues lower down into the areas of the grass and the trees. The reason I'm using a very large paintbrush for such very little canvas is I don't want to be fiddling around with detail. If you feel you're a little bit tight with your painting or a little bit too careful, this is a really wonderful exercise to get you to loosen up. You can use the corner of the brush to do details and broad brush strokes with the flat of the brush, and also what I like is about using one of these is the linear aspect. You can make good lines, for instance the edge of the oast house. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So I'm going to start by mixing my colours. I'm going to be using stand oil to make the paint a little bit more pliable, but because I'm working very much alla prima, which means painting in a day, so you work wet paint on wet paint, I won't be using too much of this. I just want to be able to make the paint a little bit smoother. This is by Lucas and it's for water-based oils. I think you've probably seen it in my last oil video. I'm going to start mixing my sky colour. It's actually slightly cerulean, however I don't have cerulean, but I could add a little hint of Viridian into it. I'm going to mix a lot because I'm going to work thick. It's got a little bit thick, so I'm going to add a little bit of stand oil. Maybe a little bit more paint. A bit more stand oil. And I'm going to add a little bit of Viridian into it, which is here. This is Lucas paint. Most of these are Lucas paints, although the cobalt blue is aqua duo, and so is the titanium white. So a little bit of that is so strong. Viridian. Oh, I've painted my picture. So I'll compare. That's reasonably close. I'll just wipe that off my picture. That's it. Gather that together and take a little bit of the white, take a bit of that, and mix a paler version down there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my different colours of the greens. I've got a very vibrant, vivid green, so I'm going to take the yellow, which is cadmium yellow light, a little bit stand oil, and actually I'm going to use some Viridian, and this creates a really strong, vibrant green. I've actually put too much Viridian in, so I'll take some cadmium yellow, a little bit of white, a bit more. Too much white and it gets a bit chalky. A little bit more yellow, and that will be my lightest green. I'm going to go with a darker green, so I'll take some more Viridian, and I'll take this time cadmium yellow deep. The reason being is it's got a little bit of red in it, and it creates more of an olive green than the cadmium yellow light. I'm going to add a little bit of red into that, and what that does is it darkens it down. That's a very dark green actually. Might use that in the foreground. So I'm just looking at all the colours that I can see on here. Add a bit of stand oil to that, and just do a proximity. So I want a little bit more of an olive green, so I'm going to take again the cadmium yellow. This time I'm going to put the yellow down first and only use light amounts of the Viridian. Bit of brown there from a previous painting, and actually that brown has made this go quite olive, so I'm going to take more of this, a little bit of Viridian because I want enough to work with. Take a bit of red, and that will dull it down a little bit. So there I have another green. All you need really to mix these different greens is, I've just got the Viridian. I could use one of the blues if I wanted to, the two yellows and the red, and I can get quite a variety of greens, and probably most of the ones that are in there in that picture. I'm also going to be drawing this out in blue, so I'm going to take some of the Ultramarine down here. Actually, no, change my mind. I'm going to take the Cobalt and put a little bit of white into it. A bit more, it's a bit loud. And take it down with a bit of a warm colour, just a hint of red, but not enough to make it purple. Just to calm it down a little bit. I think I've still got a bit of yellow in there as well. That's okay. I like that colour. A bit more blue. I've got a nice deep brown here, so I'm going to take some of the red, some of this cadmium yellow deep. I need a bit more cadmium yellow deep. Took me a minute to find cadmium yellow deep. This is Cobra, which is another make that I don't mind too much. It's a little bit weaker than the Lucas Berlin paint, but it's not too bad. So some of this into there. And then I'm going to put a little bit of Viridian into there to make it into a brown. I think it needs to be a bit more red with a bit more green. So that's got a little bit of stand oil in it to make it a slightly more pliable. That's it for now. I'm going to probably be mixing a few more darker colours as I go, but I want to get this drawn out. So using my big brush, I'm going to, it's a bit dirty. I was painting a dog yesterday and it's paint stuck in the brush, but I'll leave it in there. If you would like to see the painting of the dog that I did this week, I will be asking Judy to post it on the website, and it will show a progression from drawing out through the painting to the final piece. Anyway, back to this. I'm going to use quite a runny paint to start off painting. So I've added a bit of water to this blue. I think actually I might go purple, a little bit darker. So some of this will come through, hopefully. So this is somewhat wider than this is compared with height. Well, what I will do is I will chop off a little bit of this over here. So I'm going to position my oast house just over here. Actually, I should put a line down the middle. That makes it a lot easier. So that's as much as I'm going to draw it out. I'm going to start off putting on blue for the background and putting in the clouds, and maybe have some blue coming down here. What will happen is the blue will work really nicely with the orange and yellow. Those two will complement each other. And I think probably because they are opposites of the colour wheel, so is purple with orange. Those two combinations will make it stand out. But anyway, first of all, I'm going to work on the sky. I think this is a little bit pale, so I'm just going to add a little bit more blue into this. And a little bit of stand oil, not too much because then it's too runny. So I'm just going to put it on. That's a little bit too dark actually. So I'll go back into what I mixed earlier and go over the top of it. Now because I'm working thick, I'm going to try and paint around the oast house so that when I put it on, I'm not having to put too many layers on top of each other. I usually put a colour over the whole thing, but I'm not doing that today. There's no rule that says you have to, although I tend to prefer that. It's the way that the old masters always worked. I'm going to use the white of the page to enhance the colours. So into there. And as I use my brush, I'm going that way, that way, that way, and sideways. I'm making lots of different brush strokes. There's a little bit of purple in there, so I might actually add a little hint into my sky over here and take some over there, like that. And maybe have a little bit up here as well. That's nice. A little bit paler over here behind this tree. Now the colours in the background are cool. I'm going to do the trees cool, a cool green, and then the heat, the hot colours, are going to be in the foreground because that's what I want to come forward. Just put that on. As you can see, I'm leaving spaces for the clouds. So now I'm going to take my titanium white. I'm going to add a little tiny hint of yellow into it. And what that will do is make it more intense. The reason being is that the yellow is a split complementary opposite to the blue, and although there's only a small amount in the clouds, it will enhance the blue, and the clouds will seem louder. So I'm going to take this cooler yellow, a bit more white. I think that's probably all it needs. That's a little bit too cool. I'm going to change my mind, which is what I do when I'm painting, and I'm going to use the warmer yellow. I could even use a little bit of red in it to make an orange, but I'll just use this instead. I want some clean white and just a hint of this yellow, quite a bit more white. I've got some blue in that. I'll take the top bit off and hope for the best. Right, so I have a different kind of white. I'm going to combine the two. I think that will work very well. And I need to have a little bit more white in there. I can go very thick. A little bit of stand oil. That's better. And maybe a little bit more yellow. If you notice, when I'm adding just a hint of a colour, I don't put it straight into my mix. I dab it at the edge to make sure that I haven't got too much before I put it in, and then I can just scrape the rest off to put in. Oops, just got a bit of dirt on my brush. And then you don't overkill your colour. So white in here, or off-white. I think a little bit more white into that mix. I might have put too much yellow. Taking it up to the oast house and working quite thickly. I'm going to put a little bit more white into it to lighten it somewhat. And then over here, it does go a little bit more cool. So I'm trying not to mix the two because I have got a little bit of yellow on my brush and it will turn it green, which I don't want. Now what I can do is, because I've put so much thick paint on, I can play with it a little bit. So just wiping off my paintbrush a bit, I can just put a few stroke marks to soften areas, and the paint is so thick it will blend quite nicely. It might be that I want to go with a little bit more intense and put a little bit more white in, but I will see how I go with the rest of it before I tweak the sky. I will, however, go over there, that bit there, and there. That's better. It's a little bit louder. I'll go over my oast house a little bit, and then I'll be painting that over the top of it. So going to the trees in the background, I'm actually going to do them blue and see what happens. This is quite a bright blue. I'm going to tone it down a bit with a little bit of this mix. And I'm just going to put in an outline of trees. That's actually too pale. I might add a touch of Viridian. That's it. It's better colour. So using the corner of my brush, I'm just going to push up and get the shape of the trees in the distance. Going behind the oast house. I think I'll go a little bit pale actually, thinking on it, because on balance this is going to come forward too much. When I'm working, I usually do make adjustments as I go So I'll put something on thinking it's fine, and then I'll rethink it straight away and change. I want it to look like trees and not mountains, so I'm going to do a little bit of feathering with pushing my brush upwards. A little bit more over here, like that. So happy with that. I'll take this blue down a little bit because I might let a bit of it show through. And down here, actually, there's quite a few bits of pale blue. I'm probably going to put those on afterwards. Actually, I was going to leave some blue underneath to come out, but I'm going to put those on afterwards. So I'll carry on with my trees. So I still want to have cool trees. So these are all quite hot greens. So I'm going to take some Viridian, mix it into my blue. And use that for the next layer of trees. So the next layer of trees will go over this. And come down, and then when I get to this level, that's probably when I will start putting on the warmer bright trees and lighter ones as well. So going into here again, using this same green. And I'm going to put a little bit of this green into here for harmony of colour. And maybe a little bit down here. So now I'm going to wash off my brush and start working a little bit onto the warmer greens. So working dark to light, I'm going to take some of this. I think if I compare them, I think I need a darker green, so I'm going to go in with a bit more Viridian, a little bit more red, and take some of this yellow, put that in. That's quite dark. So what will happen is, because I'm putting this behind the oast house will stand out more. So I'm just using artistic license. I'm not trying to place the trees exactly where I see them in the photograph. And down here also a little bit darker. This building is very bright, so that will stand out. However, this building, which could be a barn, is quite dark, so I want to have a little bit of a lighter green in behind there. So coming forward over on this side, I want it to be quite a bit lighter. So I'm adding a bit of white, and then I'm going to add a bit of red to make it more olive. And I'm just going to take the hair off the brush and work into the trees a little bit like that, just adding a bit of light. Like that. There's a little hint of brown in there which I'm going to put in as well over the top. And again, I'm working with the corner of my brush mostly because this is very small, so I'm going to put a little bit of brown into here like that. At the moment it's looking a little bit like an alpine scene, but I'll just bear with it and see what happens. Within here it's very pale, so I'll take some of this yellow and put it in there, a little bit of white to make it more solid, and then I'll just push into that. So that's a bit paler. So now I'm going to start to work on the oast house, I think, because that's the thing that I really like about this picture. I've got the olive greens and a little bit of this lime green, and there's a little hint of orange in there, an orange red. So I'm going to look at what I've got, and I'm going to start dark. And this is where I can use my flat to draw the side. Like that. I don't think that's the right green. I'm going to add a little bit of red into it. It is actually very dark in contrast against the background. That's better. And then it goes slightly brown. And then you have your lime green coming in, which I suppose is this one. I'm going to put a little bit there. And then it's a mid green down the other side. Don't think my roof is long enough. I'm going to drop it down. I think I need a little bit more of the lime green down here. And a bit more of the dark green. Then I'm going to work the barn. So I think this is a little bit bright and loud. So I'm going to take some of it and add a little bit of Viridian to dull it down, a little bit of the red. And I've got a dark brown. So I'm going to put on this dark triangle here that I can see. And then it does go lighter around there, so I'm going to add a bit of white into this orange brown. Going up that way. And I'm just covering up the windows because I can put those in afterwards. And that drops down there. I'm going to warm that up a little bit with having a little bit more of a hot brown. And then that gets covered in green further down. Trying not to leave white. This is another reason why usually I put on a ground colour underneath the painting. I'm going to put a little bit of blue in there on that little white dash. So take some of this, I think. Just put a little hint of blue and another little hint maybe down this side. What I would say when you're doing this is just to explore and experiment and don't worry about making a mistake. Just put a colour, if you feel like it, in a place where it's not necessarily there on the photograph. So moving on to the actual oast house, I think I need to use a yellow, a red with a bit of white to get that kind of orange. And I'm going to make sure I get a nice straight line. I'm going over the trees. Now that roof is more or less flat. It does slightly go up, but not a great deal. I'm going to take a little bit of yellow and there. And it goes very pale down here. And then it starts to get a bit more red. And as you can see, I'm still moving my brush around to get different brushwork going. And then on the other side, I think it's very similar tonally So I'm going to take some of this plus some purple. I haven't used the purple much actually, that just seems to be the way it's gone, and I'm going to go in there quite dark actually, so make sure I get a nice symmetrical line with the other side. And that drops down there. Take a little bit more of the pale colour around the door. That's better. Now at the top is there is a yellow in there as well, so I'll just drag what I have here and put that in. And this is where it can get a little bit tricky working with a big brush, but you get quite a nice effect. You get a loose effect, an expressive effect. A little bit of my purple to go down the side there. That's quite dark actually. So because that's a little bit of a funny shape, what I can do is go into my blue over here and just completely cover that mistake like that. Fine with that. Now along here there is a little bit of a pale line, so taking that yellow, mixing it into the red, adding a bit more yellow, sorry, taking the white, mix it into the red, add a little bit more yellow, and then take a roll on my brush and just place in that line like that. And now I'm going to start to work, well actually I was going to put the door in, but I'll put those in afterwards. I'm going to work the light area over here. So there's a very light chimney, so I'll put that in. That goes right down the side of the house. And then also you've got a little triangle of paler colour there. I think it's actually a little bit more orange than what I've got. That's it. And then the front of the house is quite bright. However, I don't want this to distract from this. So probably what I will do is lighten the areas around here and slightly bring that down a bit. I'm going to take some white and put it into my peachy colour, maybe a little bit more. Actually, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to take white and put it into my blue, because blue and orange are opposites of the colour wheel and they will enhance each other. And also that will create a nice harmony with the sky. I think I need to bring that chimney down a little bit more. Like that. I'm thinking this is a little bit too hot. Anyway, I'm going to dip into what's left of my colour here and just maybe put a few slats across. A little bit clumsy, but it has lightened it. Yes, that will do. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working on the darker areas, but first I'm just going to put this roof in. So I'm just going to take this colour, which is a little bit too dark, and put a little bit of white into it. And that goes slightly up perspective wise. Needs to be a bit paler because it needs to come forward. So the angle's wrong, but I'll correct that as I go. And there's also a little bit of a line that goes down there. Then down this side there's a lot of green. That's not quite right. It needs a little bit of yellow in that. I'll put the green over, I think. I'll just keep that roof for now. And then that disappears into the bank here. So now I'm going to start to work darker. This is pretty dark here, and in here is dark, and that's the darkest. That is actually a good focal point because you've got your contrast of your dark and your light, and that always draws the eye. So I'm going to mix a very dark colour there. So I'm going to take red and a little bit of Viridian and a spot of Ultramarine to make a black. And I'm just going to use the shape of my brush to run the door along there like that. And also I'm going to put in a little bit of detail on here, going up there, down, and there is slight patterning going on in here, but I don't want too much detail there. There's also a dark line that runs under the eaves. That's about it for there. I'm going to use the same colour because it's so very dark, but there's a little bit more red gone into it. It is quite a deep red, and if I put this on, what will happen is the hills, I keep thinking it's an alpine scene, the trees in the background will just start to disappear a little bit. I'm not too happy. I think that's, well, I think it's a bit too red. I'm going to just add a little bit more green into it and go down the side here along there. It's quite tricky to get detail with this big brush, and you have to just think to yourself that you're not too worried about the detail. You just have to go with it. Some people will find this just not really a very favourable way to work, preferring to go into detail with smaller brushes, but some people do find this liberating. I'm going to put a little bit more dark in there, even though it's not really there. That works well. I've just noticed there's a sort of a wall here, which it looks like quite a dark greenish colour. I'll just put that in like that. There are two windows, so I'm going to block those in with the corner of my brush. There and there. And I'll just let that dry a little bit. Before I put the top layer on. So going back to the Oast house, I think I want to put a little bit more of that red orange in. It's very nice. Red, yellow and the white. A bit more red. Yeah, that's better, like that. Maybe have a line going down. It looks a little bit pixeled. So moving on, I'm going to put the dark in there. It's actually darker than the roof. Even though it's very thick, if I decide that this is too dark, I can take it off a little bit with a palette knife, or just try and paint over it with a thicker paint. So red into the blue. And I don't think I need any green. That's quite dark. So that goes down there like that. And I've just left a little bit of the blue from underneath to show through, which I like. So this kind of painting, very often, although you have a basic plan for it, you get spontaneous things happening and you just go with it. You might at the end decide that you really don't like what you've done and then just want to bin it, or you might decide that it's a different way of working and you like the look of it. So I'm going to go a little bit lighter for this roof here. And in that. and it drops down at a different angle to what I drew it, and then cuts across there. And I'm also going to put a dark line. There is actually a shadow cast by that chimney. Dark line down the other side as well. So what I'll probably have to do is repaint the white of that building, so I get a very thin line, because I'm working with big brush, I've made a very thick line. So taking my pale blue, I'm just going to redraw, and there you have a little fine line. Not very perspective correct. I think this building wouldn't stand up to building regs. I'll just put in a little bit of dark there, like that. I just realised there's another little one, but I can't fit that on anyway. There is quite a nice wall, so that's going to go in there with a brownish colour, and that goes over to there. So this barn-like building comes lower down because it's in front. I might extend it across just a little fraction. That was not well done, because you can see I've made a wiggly line. However, I corrected it ish. I think my perspective is slightly out on that. What I can do is take a pale blue and just redraw the edge of the roof. That's even worse. So taking a dark colour, I'm going to go over that and correct it again. There we are. So I'm going to wash my brush, and I'm going to start working on the warmer greens in the front. Oh, I forgot about this roof. So I'm going to take some of this brownish colour and darken it. So a little bit more red in there. I'm nearly out of Viridian. Bit of Viridian. A little bit more red. And I think a bit more Viridian. So I'll just squeeze a bit out. That's too green. Although actually over this side it is slightly green. So I'm going to just push the corner of my brush in, because this is textured, this edge. It's not a straight edge. It's not that dark, so I'm going to go over that. Take red and green, a bit more red because that's too green, and go in darker. Might be too dark. I don't want the eye to be drawn over here, so I'm going to take some of my mix, a bit more red, and maybe a spot of white, or even a spot of yellow. That will lighten it a little bit, and go over this bit here. Can have a little bit of texture in there. Take some dark. And there's a little triangle at the top which is very dark, so I'm going to take some really dark colour on the corner of my brush and just put that triangle in like that. It's very intense, this, actually, and that is because I do have a lot of split complementaries going on here, as well as the tetradic rectangle. So going back into the background, I've missed out a few little areas of trees. I think the reason these look like mountains is because they are very blue. So I'm going to go in with a little bit of green into my blue and just go over them slightly and fill in a few white areas. But I'm not going to make them too warm, so I won't be putting any yellow in, although I can see a yellow green in the background. So coming forward, this is where the colours start to get a little bit more intense. I need to mix a very dark olive green. So taking my Viridian, my dark red, and a little bit of the pale yellow, because I don't want it to be too black. I want it to be subtle. There we are. And over here, I'm going to just go in and put the shadow shapes where I can see them. This goes very dark in here. And again, the way to get the bush shapes is just to push upwards with your brush. And I do a lot of dabbing. Very dark down here. You can just see a little bit of grey wall on this building here, so I'll put that in shortly. Dark up there, within there, and dark down within there. I think that's about it for the darkest green. Sorry, just washing my brush without saying anything. So now I'm going to go for the pale yellows. So I'm going to take some of this. It seems a bit acidic. Let's hold it to slightly acidic. So I'm going to add a touch of the red, and what that does is it takes the acid away, because it's a warm colour going into a cool colour, and it just tones it down slightly. I've added a bit of white, and I'm going to start pushing into here. I'm picking up some of the brown underneath, which actually works very well. There's a little bit over here, and it goes a little bit paler up there. There's some pale green that goes over there around the door, and then you've got quite a yellow green down here. So back into my pale green. I'm allowing a little bit of this blue to show through, and then over here also you've got a palish bush. I'm going to drag some of the green down, and you can see that really comes forward. Nothing really to do with the colour wheel, it's to do with warm and cool. And that actually goes grey, so I'll take this blue, I'll add a little bit of this purpley colour into that, a little bit of yellow, and you have a sort of a grey, so put that in. It's actually a bit too pale, so I'm going to mix a shadow colour, so a darker grey with the blue, a yellow and a red, a bit more blue, and that will do for that. And then I want some of this whiter. Actually could put a bit of blue in here. That works reasonably well. So within this area here also we do want to have a little bit of green. But then you've got a little bit of a light foliage as well. Take it along the top of the wall and then get a bit of a paler colour just to add a few highlights. Ooh, that's really, really acidic. I don't like that. So I'm going to mix a bit of white into this green and go over that. Making a mess of the bush, so back in with the dark colour. Like that. And I think more dark green around here. And then you have a bank. Now underneath all this pale area you do have a darkish green, so I'm just going to take what I've got on the palette and just put that in. And I'm going to put some blue in as well. And that creates a nice harmony between the whole. Maybe a little bit of ultramarine. Bit of the paler green. Now this should be a bit darker underneath. Wouldn't quite fancy having a blue though. And then we want a little bit of a darker olive green over on this building. So I'll run out of my pale yellow. And just put a little bit of this on first. So I'm just dabbing away. And then there's a darker green in there. And then over the top I'll put some lighter. I think also I need to give the suggestion of tiles. So next I'm going to put a little bit more dark around here. I still feel that's too light. So it's a dark grey again. So ultramarine, yellow, a bit more ultramarine, pale colour and a spot of red. A bit more ultramarine. That's a blue grey in there. And what that will do is that will make it go backwards when I put the flowers on. So I need a little bit of a paler yellow to go over some areas here, and particularly up here. So I'll get my cadmium yellow light again. Sorry, just rooting around until I find it. This is the problem with keeping all your paints in a box. You never find a colour that you really want. So taking some of that and some of that. I'm running out of space, so I'll have to put it here. A bit more of that. Some nice Viridian. That's too loud. Viridian is so strong. Perfect for turquoises though. So going into, no, that's way too loud. So more yellow, spot of red. And maybe a little bit more in there. A little bit of a darker green down here. Also, this chimney's got a dark line down the side of it, so I'll just put that in as well. So I'll put on both sides of my brush, and then I'll just drag it down the side there. And also this shadow is not right, so I'll pull that down. I might make a little bit of red in there. That's going to be too much. So shadow. And there's a little bit of greenery over this side of the oast house. So I'll put that in. and down the back here. I'll fill that white in, and then I will have to take some of this dark and redraw that line. So I'm going to put in some little windows here. So I'm going to use very carefully the corner of my brush again. No, that's got a roaming bristle, it's broken. So I'll use the bottom end. A little mark down. I need a lot of paint because the white underneath is wet, so it just dilutes the dark colour I'm putting on top. And I'm just looking at my barn roof, and I think the angle's not quite right, so I'll take some of this. In fact, I'll put a little bit of red in there and a bit of Viridian, and that makes a very dark colour. And I'll take that up a little bit to the apex, like that. Actually, that adds an interesting angle. And I'm going to put a nice line along here. And just use a bit of my dark red mixture from here to darken this side. Oops, splodged a bit. Go back, add a bit more in there. Take that off a bit because it's a bit of a heavy dark colour. So on the top of the oast house, there is a pale line which goes up there like that. And I'm going to put a little bit of detail onto this barn. So I'm going to give my brush a good wash to make sure I get a lot of the dark paint out of it. The downside of using water-based oils is, unlike acrylic, where the water gets the paint out, very often it's quite sticky, so it stays in your brush. But that's something you get used to. So I'm going to use a very thin angle of brush, and I'm just going to put in the roof here. And I think that might be a bit thick. I'm going to add a spot of stand oil into it. It's gone a bit yellow. Too yellow. As you can see, I'm on the very edge of my palette now. This is usually how I end up working, squashed in a corner. Usually I have more palette because I use the whole of the tile. I'm going to turn this so that I can get a good line going down here. I just picked up paint instead of putting paint on it. So I'm going to just touch like that. And for the windows, I don't want it to be white anyway. So using the corner of my brush, I'm going to do, no I'm not, I'm going to go from the other side. Align that way, on that way. Oops, bit of an accident there. I can adjust that. So this is where you really can't fiddle too much. So using the corner of my brush, down a stroke and a stroke, like that, and down that side as well. And then there is a line going across the top. So I'm barely touching the surface here. But I'm going to take some of my dark colour from here and just correct that a little bit. I can see some green in the side of this here. That's too light. So I'm just going to put a little bit of that in. And there are some beams, I think, uprights. So I'm going to exaggerate those a little bit for interest and just put those in. Like that. Still not happy with the angle of that roof. So I'm going to try again. I'm going to mix some ultramarine with some white. And try and put in a fresh angle. And I'm going to make a little bit more of my darkest colour, so mixing the red with the green. So I get a very nice dark colour. I'm going to drop the roof down on this side to change the angle. That's a bit better, I'm a bit happier with that. And I think the wall could be a little bit darker. There's also on the wall a little bit of pale brickwork, so I'll just go into my pink and just put that in. That's going to be too pale, a little bit darker. Like that. And it's also the same on the other wall over here. Let's take that chimney down. So a little bit of something on the top of the chimney. And there is another chimney actually over here, which I can put in very badly. I need to correct that a little bit. And now I'm going to put in the flowers here. I was going to put purple in this, but it turns out that I haven't put purple in this, so I'm going to probably do a pale blue. I'll see, I could add a bit of purple in here. There is a little bit of purple in this roof, maybe a bit of purple in here and purple there. So let's see how it looks. So if I take sort of pale colour, a little bit of my purple, maybe a bit of brown in there to mute it down. That's killed it. A bit more, oops, one colour. Oh dear, start again down here. Actually, there is a little bit of this colour in here. So I'm just going to put that in. Maybe a little bit of purple in the background. That's too dark. Just go over that. A bit more purple. And maybe some of this colour down here. Tonally, this is actually quite a dark painting. I think it's because my oast house needs a bit of lightening, so I'll be doing that shortly. So I'm going to take my white and some of this blue. I'm going to add a hint of purple into it. And I'm just going to put in some suggestions of the flowers. So I'm just dabbing them on. Take a bit of paint off my brush and just put in a little bit there. and I'll put some lighter ones in, I think. Quite fancy having a bit of the pink in there as well. So I'm just turning my brush and dabbing at the moment. Take that down there. And a few paler ones. I always use the back end of my brush. Put a few little dots in. So now I'm just going to do a little bit of lightening and darkening. That's actually a little window that I missed there, so I'll put that in. Take some of the white off my brush, back into the dark colour in there. And also there's some little windows along here, but I'm going to lighten those tabs first. So I need to get a little bit more white, I think. I'll put it somewhere else so it's clean. And taking it down to here, I'm going to add some yellow, bit of this red colour, and that's actually quite pale, so I'm going to put that on top of what I've done. And make sure I get a nice line. And also I want a bit of a line down the side of this as well. That's better. Gives it a little bit more sunshine. I'm going to do a very pale yellow, but I don't want it too acidic. So I'm just merging all these colours. And a little bit of that maybe into here. And into this bit here. And onto the roof. It's about 25 degrees today, and this is water-based oils, and they are already drying. So if you want oil paints that dry very quickly, these are just perfect, even with stand oil in them. So going back to the windows on this, I'm going to take some of my dark colour, which I'm going to have to mix again. So red and green. I'm using the very corner of my brush. They're darker on this side. And then they get a bit lighter on the other side, slightly more red, I think. Oops, that was way too big. So I will chop that down a little bit. But first of all, I'm going to put a dark line along here, like that. And I'm still not happy about this area here. I think I'll just take what's on my brush and try and darken that down a bit, and then put some flowers going over it. Now that looks better, because what that does is it makes it look like it's receding. And there is a lintel above the door. And you can see a little bit of a brick wall inside there, so I'll just put a bit of something in there. A bit more red, I think. A little bit more greenery around here. So I'm just doing a few little details now. Line down there. Oh, that was very badly done, so I will correct it. With a dark colour and redraw that line down there of the triangle. And using this colour, I just want to correct that window a little bit. Like that. I think this is a little bit too loud, so I'm just going to put a bit of green over it. Like that. And just to reinforce that side of the host house, make it a bit darker. We'll take some of this blue. I have to clean my brush first because I've made a few marks in the sky. And I need to go over that a bit more blue, I think. It's a bit too pale. Yeah, it's very dry. And then I suppose I've got a little bit of this kind of tree at the side to put in. So I'm going to go with a dark green. And then the paler colour on top. Just tweak that over there. So that's it for today, and oh, I actually think I'll put a little bit of a shadow in there. That's it. So I hope you enjoyed it. It ended up a little bit chocolate boxy for me. It's not normally the way I work, but I really enjoyed doing it, and it made a change. And using a big brush makes a difference to stop you fiddling, and also thinking about the colour wheel and how colours work together as you work through your painting is always very useful. So see you next time. Goodbye.